Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Eric Gall. He is the founder of Edison Business Advisors. He's out of Florida and I'm excited to learn from him today. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thanks, Ron. Pleasure to be here.
Cool. So I know you've been doing this, 20 plus years or something? Can we do the origin story? I always start off with everybody with the origin story. My running joke is you were born and then you ended up on a show about mergers and acquisitions. Can you fill out the gap in between?
Yeah, it didn't happen that quick. I got my start back in the late 90s at Ford Motor Company, working in the business office where I did a lot of post-merger integration work with Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo, Mazda, Ford. And while I was there, I became involved just kind of haphazardly in selling off some small internet-based businesses that they purchased before the internet bubble, as well as getting involved in some joint ventures that we did in the licensing space. So as our office got involved in that, it kind of started the bug for me. And then in the mid 2000s, with a few friends of mine, we decided we would go off and we would try to pull some money together, create a little small private equity group, and purchase some businesses on our own. So we did that. We purchased 7 businesses in automotive services, transportation and logistics, and software. And we operated those for a while, and the Great Recession hit. And many of them bailed on me and went back into the corporate world. Jobs are a much safer environment than being an entrepreneur. I kind of inherited the management of everything and had to make some decisions. I could hire some people to run some businesses, but I couldn't run them all myself because I didn't have a team anymore. And with the money tightening up and everything else going on, the cost of materials, like in the automotive service businesses, the cost of oil shot through the roof. The cost of tires, which are made, are oil byproduct, shot through the roof. So the margins just minimized. The decision was made that I needed to start selling these businesses off. So we packaged them up and we started selling them off. And I really enjoyed that process of not just selling them off, but even buying them at the time in the early 2000s. So as I sold those off, my thoughts were, okay, I could go back into corporate America, or I could leverage some of the skills and knowledge that I gained in buying and selling businesses and help other people do it. So we made that decision in 2009. I got started down here. We stayed in Florida. Started with a gentleman out of Orlando, Florida, who was probably about a 25-year veteran at the time in the industry. He's still going at it in his mid 70s. And he was more Main Street because I felt I should probably get my feet wet selling the smaller businesses first, right? So I sold a lot of restaurants for him. I sold a lot of salons and day spas, and it was a good experience, but I really wanted to go a little bit more upmarket into the lower middle market. And his business and branding was more situated in Main Street type businesses. I made a decision to leave in 2014 and start my own business. We named it Edison. There was a precursor to Edison Business Advisors, but we stuck with the name Edison, but we kept some continuity here, and it eventually became Edison Business Advisors in 2019. But over that time period, we were able to move the business a little bit upmarket into the lower middle market, where we're targeting deals now at $1 million to $25 million in enterprise value. But we also still do some local Main Street businesses here in Southwest Florida, where we don't have to travel too far. And we will do, obviously, businesses that'll go up to between that 25 and 50 million mark as well.
Awesome. And then are there specific industries that you like to work within or the just broad spectrum?
Well, oddly enough, I had a CPA firm approach me a few years ago, and they asked me if I could sell some dental practices. And there was some training available at the time through IBBA on dental practice sales. So I jumped on that. And I had a little bit of experience in the dental world as I lived with four dentists in grad school for a period of time. And then I also, one of them remained a really good friend of mine, and I helped him with the acquisition and eventual sale of his dental practice at one time. So kind of peripherally involved. So I learned a little bit, but not a ton. But the education offered by IBBA was very, very helpful. So it allowed me to create templates. And basically, as a former process engineer at Ford, it helped me create a process for properly preparing a dental practice for sale, getting the information that a buyer needs to make that decision. I started down that road and I've had some success in dental practices, also in medical related businesses, including medical practices, medical billing businesses, and the like. So, I mean, that's where I've kind of migrated towards, and I'll call it one finger of a five finger hand. My background and passion was always manufacturing, being an engineer. So, machine shops, metal benders, anything that's manufacturing related, I'm very comfortable in that space. Know what questions to ask the seller, know how to prepare those businesses for sale as well. There's not a ton of them in Southwest Florida, so the ones I have sold are predominantly in the Midwest. So I'll go up to Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, Michigan, New Jersey, et cetera, where I have some connections. And I'll sell manufacturing type businesses there. And then, of course, there's all the service related businesses that we have down here in Southwest Florida, where I cut my teeth when I got into the industry, as well as I continue to sell those today. So those are contractors, including like AC contractors, drywallers, remodelers, you name it, electrical contractors. So several of those as well. So those service related. Also, service related businesses would include things like lawn and landscaping companies. We were talking earlier about how some of these aren't very sexy businesses for the young people, but they're money makers. They're consistent. The business stuff grows in Florida. So it needs to be cut back, needs to be trimmed, and it's a year round business down here. They're great businesses for someone to purchase and operate for long term. So we've done a lot of those in addition to the restaurants and salons and spas and things of that nature as well.
Awesome. So let's go circle back around to we'll kind of go through the different things you do. And let's start off with the medical. Are your buyers primarily dentists, chiropractors, doctors in the profession? Or are you guys working with the outside buyers like DSOs, MSOs, and that type of stuff?
Yeah, predominantly in the medical and dental space, we're working with dental service organizations, medical service organization, folks that are rolling up those
Yep.
practices. A lot has changed in the world over the past 20 years. When I was young and hanging out with the young dentists, their mission was to collect enough money to purchase their own practice. The reality is today, these young dentists, a couple things have happened. One is because of their school debt, it's taken them a lot longer to collect that money to purchase that initial practice. And I think the entrepreneurial spirit that was there I'm pushing 60, not quite there yet. But in my day, there was a strong entrepreneurial spirit among me and my classmates. That I saw kind of disappear in the kids that graduated high school in the 90s and early 2000s. And I think it's starting to come back with the younger set now, fortunately. But there's a gap in age groups where I just want to work for somebody.
Yeah, there's a lot of those popping up. They've been popping up for the last 15, 20 years. Like even when I just
Mhm.
moved here from Tulsa, Oklahoma, I had a horrible experience at one, but I get it. I'm about to say their name, and it's just to clear it up. It wasn't the franchise; it was that doctor at that franchise. But there's one and that goes around. It's called My Dentist, and what it is buy up a dentist office, and then the dentists come in and they get a salary to manage as many clients as they want, and everything else is taken care of for them. So that's typically your dental service organization. And for the
Mhm.
listeners, if you're not a dentist or not a chiropractor or not a doctor or not a veterinarian, chances are in most states you can't buy a practice unless you set up one of these DSOs, MSOs. So DSO is a dental service organization and MSO is a medical service organization. The thing is, if you set one up, you can't tell the dentist or medical professional how to treat a patient. But everything else, they're a salaried employee of yours, but they have to have full spectrum of who to treat, what they're allowed to treat them with, what medications they can use and stuff. You can't have any say in that. The only reason I know is when I first got into the space 2 years ago, somebody had come up to me and said, we basically formed these groups where we're helping each other out. And the group kind of split down the middle. And like some of the guys are going to go off and do a DSO roll up, and the other guys are going to do a marketing roll up. So I have a marketing MBA. So I went with the team to go do a marketing roll up by marketing agencies and did not participate in the dental roll up side. I did the research of both of them fairly thoroughly before I made my decision, even though my master's degree is in marketing. I still wanted to know which one was. So it was fascinating, right? It was fascinating that I think at that time it was, I'm going to mess this up, either 38 or 40 something states, you can't own a dental office unless you're a dentist. So that's cool. So you're
Right.
helping local practices sell up to these DSOs, and I'm sure there's some volume or some accounts where somebody's coming from dental school and their parents are helping them buy a practice or something.
Well, certainly the smaller ones where the
Yeah.
DSOs don't have interest in, those will trade to another dentist. And it could be, I don't want to say that the younger generation can't afford it or they aren't enthusiastic about eventually owning their practice. There's certainly a good set of those out there who will buy. It's just a smaller set because what's happened is they've gotten comfortable working for someone. They need to still pay back that debt, or the DSOs coming into the picture have been able to pay a premium and they've driven up the price of the business of the practices across the board. So
Right.
they're competing against someone who's got deep pockets. So it's changed the dynamic of the industry and definitely the transaction size and volume and everything associated with dentistry and medical right now.
In your experience, at what level do the DSOs want to start playing in? Like, what's below their minimal threshold? Just ballpark.
I think they like to see about 500,000 in EBITDA and up.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. And
Right.
that, for a dentist office, that's not very big, actually. I mean, I had a car wreck and lost some of my. I don't show it, but I wear a partial because I've shattered. I hit my head real hard in the car wreck and shattered a bunch of my teeth. But that dental bill alone was in the thousands, like not quite tens of thousands, but daggum close. So I can imagine that. And I was in that chair for what, 3 different sessions, 2 different days for an hour or two apiece, and he's busy, right? I had to wait a couple
Mm-hmm.
weeks to see him, so I can imagine it's him and 2 dental assistants and another dentist. I bet he's pushing that. If you do the numbers, like if once somebody's fairly established, $500,000 in EBITDA, and I don't know what their expenses are. They got rent, and that equipment has to be outrageous, right? What is the ballpark? I wonder what that is. That's a good fascination question. What is the ballpark? I guess you evaluate this on a regular basis. You're selling dental offices. What is the opportunity cost to set up a dental office instead of buying one? Like, what does all the equipment per station normally run?
Wow, I mean, I haven't gotten involved in setting one up, so I can't really tell you. But when you're talking about, well, honestly, I was peripherally involved. I sold a dental office practice. He had 6 offices. His EBITDA was probably around the $900,000 range. And in one of those offices, part of the purchase agreement called for the seller to expand his office by doubling it into the space that was next door. He had a small, I think it was like 1,200 square foot office, and he converted that into a 2,400 square foot office. And in the contract, he was going to be reimbursed for that. And if I recall, it was probably about $250,000 of cost for equipment and interior build out of that 1,200 square feet. So I think he had 4 operatories that he added in that space. So if you look at it from that perspective, because there's some efficiency there, you're probably talking somewhere around 600 to $800,000 per operatory. No, 60 to $80,000 per
60 to
operatory.
80, okay.
Rough
So,
estimate.
I had when I was in the real estate community, I actually had a real estate private lender that was a dentist, and those they're transactional. So you sell a house, you give them their money back, and then you find a new house and you say, "Hey, I'm ready for a loaning," and they make money every transaction. So we sold a couple of houses, paid off to this dentist lady, and I won't say her name on here because I didn't get permission to. But she said, "Hey, might be a while before I'm ready to lend to you again. I'm gonna add 2 more chairs." And on a regular basis, she would lend me between 200 and $300,000 to do real estate. So I was like, "Well, how much does these chairs cost?" She goes, "Well, I gotta tear down the wall," and she told me all this stuff, and the majority of the cost was the chair, the X-ray, because each one has its own equipment. But that setup and all that drills was, I think it was like $80,000-$90,000 for her digital everything she needed to have a booth. And she bought enough space out of the building to do four new chairs, and she was going to do two and then two more later. But put it this way, by the time she had got her cash situated enough where she called me back and said, "I'm ready to lend to you again," I'd already found two other lenders and didn't do enough volume to need her. But I always like thanked her. And but yeah, that it gets expensive. So that's one of the reasons why, I mean, these businesses need to change hands. We're talking about mom and pop, Main Street businesses. You do a lot of even the manufacturing companies. A lot of these communities, these manufacturing companies are in, they're one of a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen businesses, and they employ 50, 60, 70, 100 people. It's a significant impact to that community if it doesn't change hands. So we were talking right before the show how it's these kids come out of college. I call them kids. The young adults come out of college and they hear about acquisition entrepreneurship, ETA, and stuff. And most of them want to run to, well, I want to own a software company. I want to own video games, or I want to do eBay store. I'm dating myself, Amazon stores, right? I'm starting to find some cool people out there that are buying these manufacturing companies, buying these lawn service companies and buying these other things. And it's usually the sweet spot. I think these are guys that most of the guys I've seen doing that, they bought one or two businesses and they respect the fact that these are established businesses with cash flow. They tend to be in their late 30s, early 40s is the guys I see that are buying these up. Is that true with what you're seeing buying the manufacturing plants and the other stuff you're selling?
It's a broad spectrum, but yeah, I would say 40 and up is the vast majority of buyers. 50 is probably the median age of buyers that I
Yeah.
work with. Going back to your earlier question on build out your own or purchase one, when you purchase a dental practice, you're purchasing a set of clients and an income stream already. So if you just look at that build out cost that we just talked about, if you were to purchase, it just makes sense because you're making money from day one.
It's interesting because when you come out of college, if you are entrepreneur or you have this desire, and I still catch myself doing it, even though I know better, I know the failure rate of small businesses, but I still want to start one here and there. If you're truly an entrepreneur, you see a problem, you want to solve it. In this space of acquisition through entrepreneurship, the problem's already solved. You're just looking to buy an existing, functioning, running business, maybe make it better. I joke around. It's like when you buy something that's up, running, been around for 30 years, it's yours to mess up instead of yours to create and build. So you're almost looking for not somebody who's so much entrepreneur, because those guys want to solve problems in the world. You're looking for operators, guys who maybe they've done it for a long time. They know how it should be done. They don't think their last boss was doing it right, and they don't want a new boss. They want to go out on their own, but they're not wanting to do it from scratch. An operator to me is a totally different species than an entrepreneur. You have to have a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit, but it's like I am truly 100% entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is when something is running well and you're doing the same thing day in and day out, my eyes glaze over and I got to have somebody else in there helping me do it because I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. I'll do it once or twice, but after I have to do it 3 or 4 times, I'm hiring assistants and team members and I want to go solve a new problem. And that's your typical entrepreneur. They're looking for the next fire to put out. So I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the majority of these businesses are selling to like the proven operators, people who they know they can run a business. They've been running their last boss's business for the last 10 years and not getting paid right to do it.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples. We'll go back into machine shops. You talked about a community that has employs a lot of folks, or an industry that employs a lot of folks. I sold two machine shops in Meadville, Pennsylvania over the past few years. And Meadville, if you look through their history, like I would call it the mecca of tool and die
Mhm.
shop, small tool and die shops. The first one I sold up there, it was a third generation machine shop, not a huge one, but a very nice shop, very clean shop, a beautiful building, long-standing customer base, did great work for their clients. And I sold that one. The individual who purchased that was, like you said, running a business for someone for 10 years. He was running a machine shop in the Cleveland, Ohio area. And he was telling me he was struggling with the direction his management was steering him because he didn't feel it was, I guess, totally ethical. And he wanted to be the head of a business that was doing great things for their clients, not someone that was trying to skimp by or squeeze by for a little bit of extra profit or margin. So we got him established in that business. He's purchased it and he's doing great. And last time I spoke to him, he was managing his way through COVID, but even through COVID, they were still dropping decent profits to the bottom line. The other one I sold up in Meadville, much larger, over 100 employees, probably about $6-7 million worth of machine tools sitting on the floor. A fourth generation. The fourth generation was in there as part of the ownership team already. And that one, the fourth generation, was just kind of not motivated to grab the bull by the horns and continue on. They were ready to exit. On that one, we sold it to a gentleman and his investment group that he put together. And they were former Continental engine folks. So they were building airplane engines. So they had sourced from machine shops across the world. So they were sourcing from machine shops in the US and China, but they knew in the aerospace industry that US source parts, especially for defense contracts and stuff, are mandatory. So they wanted a US based machine shop that they could purchase and then grow. And they're doing phenomenal. The new blood that they brought in, the new clients that they're bringing in, they've been kicking butt. Both groups were rather young. So the first individual was probably right around 40 years old. The second group, they were closer to that 50 mean that we were talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed you said fourth generation. I kind of stepped back a little bit. The running
Yeah.
joke is the first generation builds it, the second generation grows it, and the third generation destroys it. And that's been the case at almost everything I've seen that is in third generation. So to make it to a fourth generation, it says a lot to that family and their family values in running that business. So that's a business that needs to be protected and carried on and make sure somebody gets their hands on it, runs it right. So and that's the case with a lot of the businesses you're dealing with, these manufacturing companies, these mom and pop. They're not owned by the Googles of the world. They're owned by the guy that has the house two doors down from you who's lived modestly in life. He didn't go buy himself a mansion, even though he might be producing $1 million. That was never important to him. What was important to him, it was usually taking care of employees, taking care of customers and stuff. And I don't think people really get the gravity of things if we don't find more people to buy these businesses in the next 10 to 15 years, the impact that's going to have on our economy. It's insane, right? If you really look at the
Yeah.
statistics, 50 something percent, 51, 52% of all, if you look at an employment base, I think it's 51 or 52% of all businesses are owned by somebody that's 60 to 65 plus or older. Like they employ over half our country, and they're going to either want to or need to retire in the next 10 to 15, 20 years, or they're going to die in their seat. Nobody gets to live forever. I've met a few of these guys. I know somebody right now who's right on 80. And I asked him, I said, his wife wants him to sell this business. His friends of one that put me in touch with him. I knew him. He was a private lender in this space, but he owns another company. And when I got him on the phone, I was like, are you interested in even selling your business? I know your wife's interested in you selling it, and your friends are telling you to sell it, but what are you wanting to do? And he literally just said, I don't want to sell it. What's going on? Because all my friends that sell their business, they die in a few weeks. I'm not ready to die. He really had it in his mind. If he didn't have anything else to do, if he didn't have a purpose in life, if he wasn't running his business, he'd be gone before long. So I was like, well, are you going to sit in that office chair until the last day? And he goes, well, I hope somebody comes find me in this office when I'm gone. He's like, that was his plan. And I said, well, who's going to run it when you're gone? He goes, my son's here. It's like, I've talked to your son. He doesn't want it. I said, maybe he'll sell it to you. He was just that very blunt about it. And he used to be a business broker years ago before he bought this one. The guy that introduced me to him, he didn't know I already knew him, but the guy that told me he might want to buy that, he bought a ham company where they call it a honey roasted a spiral cut ham. Frank had bought this honey baked ham spiral cut ham company in town that was doing really well from this other gentleman. There is some of that in the world out there. The guys are just like, I don't know, there's nothing else for me to do. I enjoy doing this, and I'm just not going to do anything else. But economy wise, if we don't find an exit or a succession plan for these businesses, it's really going to have an impact on us.
This is probably a great time to talk about the SBA changes that are coming down the pipe. I think they'll help immensely in addressing this. The SBA rules in the past, if you sold your business and the buyer used an SBA note to purchase it, the seller couldn't stay on as an employee any longer than 12 months. They had to fully exit the business and they had to sell 100% of the company to that buyer or buyer group. The SBA announced last week that they were going to allow fractional ownership, which basically means the seller can retain a portion of the ownership and stay on longer term. So I think this is going to open up a whole new world of how deals get done in that, I'll call it $7-8 million and less range in enterprise value. You're going to see a lot more folks who are going to look at this opportunity from the SBA and say, okay, I can sell a portion of my company now to my employees, to family members, and still stay in that seat to run the company or help run the company as long as they want. And then that fractional of ownership that they keep, they can sell down the road. So that's one opportunity. The other opportunity is we're looking at is folks who may be younger and they're looking at, hey, I'd love to take this business to the next level. I just don't have the capital to grow it. Maybe there's some folks with operating experience who can come in and invest, and I'll give them an ownership share. So you'll see people taking out SBA loans to invest in a company to give them the working capital to say, if it's that dental practice that doubled their size or a machine shop that needed a couple $1 million more of new machine tools to service a new contract that they're putting a bid on. It's tough to get that capital for an owner. They can go to this fractional ownership model. Someone can go to the SBA and then invest in that business or purchase a portion of that business, creating kind of that migration out of that baby boomer generation that, right now is all or nothing in those small businesses.
It's interesting. A lot of the guys who do what I do, they've shied away from the SBA because of the different business models. And one of those business models is they'll raise the funds, or they have some funds of we have some funds of our own. They have funds of their own. And they're doing holding companies. So they're not rolling up, they're buying companies that fit a certain criteria, sticking it in a holdco. And one of the ways that we like to find great companies is things we don't have to manage. So we bring an outside operator in, and it's very common to have that outside operator put some skin in the game. That's what we were going to do with this concrete plant. Is we had already identified somebody who was great at running a company. He took his last company. It was financially distressed. They were doing, I say that, they were doing about 9.5, 10 million after doing higher numbers before. He comes in as like the GM type of level, general manager type, pretty much ran the thing, but took it over $100 million in short of like 5 or 6 years. Like really turned this thing around. The parent company, the owners sold it, so he took an exit at that point, and he's looking to buy his own. Didn't know anything about search or anything, but we found this concrete plant that was kind of in the same situation. So he had about $300,000 that he could invest, and we were going to buy the concrete plant, offer a big chunk of it to him, start off at around 15 or 20% of it to him, and have him earn more of it over time. So come in, he puts his down payment, he puts his money in, got skin in the game. And then over the years, as he corrects it, he gets bonus structures, and he ends up being a 45% owner of it. And then we exit in 5 to 6 years. That was the whole game plan. You can't do that in the SBA. The SBA is always like, well, you can't do partial. So we were always having to,
Right.
okay, do private placement memorandums and like how are we going to raise the funds, who's pitching in what. So it does open up a lot of doors for all you guys out there doing, whether you're doing a hold co or roll up or whatever. You can actually, once they institute it, and we see the rules. They've made the announcement that they haven't made the rules yet, have they?
They haven't, and those are kind of highly anticipated right now.
Yeah. So once we see the guideline, they're opening up the floodgates a little bit here. Let's see what happens when they define what can go down that channel.
Mhm.
There's a potential here that it opens up the doors to a lot more of these mom and pop Main Street businesses, these small medium businesses to change hands.
Definitely, a lot of the sellers I speak with, the first question you ask them is when they have kids in the business is like, why don't you sell to your kids? And they'll say, well, my kids don't have the money. The kids can leverage an SBA loan and purchase, say, 80% of the company over 10 years as the parents exit. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. Before, like you could only stay, like you said, the owner can only hang around for 12
Mhm.
months. A lot of these guys are just not ready to totally leave. I might circle back around to the guy I was telling you about earlier and say, hey, what if we could do this where you don't have to leave? You can
Right.
still show up every day. You can still make sure the products are made right. We'll do what we do best. We're going to revamp your website because it's old. We're going to put you in some different channels. Now, one of the things I was going to do is put him on Amazon, and I just seen his products all over Amazon. So maybe somebody stepped in and got it there for it. It's been a year since I talked to him. I gave him a verbal playlist of what we were wanting to do with it. So maybe he just acted upon it, and which is cool.
I've already started assembling a list of sellers or prospective sellers that I've spoken to in the past who've said,
Mhm.
yeah, I'd really like to sell to my kids, but I'm thinking that the way to go is a third party sale. The reason is because my kids don't have the money and I don't want to stick around and run the day to day and be here 60 hours a week while they learn the business. But I can think of one right off the top of my head. He's a pool contractor, he does very high end pools. And he's got 4 kids in the business. And I asked him, why don't you sell to your kids? And he said, well, they're still too young, a little bit too green to do so. Maybe 10 years down the road, they could run this business themselves. But at 26 to 20, they're not ready. But if you gave them 80% ownership through an SBA loan, and as that's being paid off, as they pay that down, the seller can train those 4 kids to operate the business and slowly kind of back himself out as he feels confident and comfortable with them running the business. And he's taken out 80% of his equity already.
He's taking some chips off the table for his retirement. It's
Mhm.
another reason why a lot of these guys don't sell their kids and stuff is they need the money for retirement. That they've done really well at running their business, but they put it all back in every single year and not built an outside portfolio that will sustain them once the business is sold. In our roll up, when we were doing the marketing roll up, my team, there's 3 or 4 of us doing the interviews. We interviewed, I want to say it was over 200, 218 or 216 marketing agencies doing 5+ million a year in almost as many days. Like we were doing 2 or 3 a day sometime, and only I could use one hand. I don't need my second hand with fingers to do my counting of businesses who had outside investments and stuff that were enough that when they sold their marketing agency, that money did not need to contribute to their retirement plans. I think they wanted their money. They're going to get their money, but only 1 or 2 of them had been paying themselves well enough and using it correctly and buying, one of the guys that come to mind, he was buying commercial real estate. He owned the building he was in. He owned the building his marketing agency was in. He owned the building across the street. He owned some other real estate. And I don't know how he's doing now because commercial real estate took one hell of a hit during COVID. Not very many business owners do that, right? A lot
Yeah.
of these business owners, everything's in their company. And they go to their CPA and you say that's one of the reasons why you got to watch what people say they want for their business before they get to you. If you get an off market deal, somebody goes, yeah, I need $3 million from business. Like, cool. How did you come up with that number? And what valuation model did you use? I'm assuming you got a $1 million seller's discretionary earnings or something. No, that's what my accountant said I needed to pay my bills off, cover my debt, and retire comfortably. I was like, okay. Those are two different things that don't have any
Yeah.
connection to each other.
Mhm.
That said, they've got to take some chips off the table. Now, the cool thing is with your scenario you were telling me, there's a new possibility, right? Father wants to sell the company to his four sons, and let's just use your pool servicing company as an example. They're not ready. He needs to take some shifts off the table, and he sells 80% of it to his kids, hangs around as an advisor, but he can take some of that money, put it back into the company, which you never would have been able to do before under SBA rules. Put some of the
Right.
money back into the company as a loan and make the kids pay that back and bring in a general manager or some education. Maybe he's a great leader, but not a great trainer. So he could
Mhm.
bring in outside resources to bring his four sons up to, or his four children to bringing them up to speed. I know a lot of great guys that are great leaders. They're not necessarily great trainers, and a lot of great trainers that are horrible leaders, right?
Yes.
And there's some people that make that bridge. There's some good people that really, they just, you would almost say that a great manager is a great trainer, but a great leader doesn't necessarily need to be one. There's a good chance that a lot of these cases, business can sell and flourish because they can sell to family, they can sell to employees, use some of the money, loan it back to the company, bring the right training in, and get them up to speed and make sure they're in safe hands and get paid back even that money later.
Yeah, I think it opens up just a whole new world of potential deal structures that we can apply based on the given situation. I just thought of another prospective client that I've been talking to who's had some health issues. And he said, well, I'd love to sell the business to my employees, but they can't afford it. But with fractional ownership, you could take two, three, four key employees and then through SBA, sell them 80% of the business.
Yeah, I've had a few guys on here. We talked about ESOPs, employee stock ownership, and they take some money to set up. Not as much as I thought they would. I thought they were going to be a lot more
Mm-hmm.
expensive to set up than that. But I still think you need to have about a seller's discretionary earnings or EBITDA of about 750K or more. You need 35 to 50 employees for it to start to really make sense. And most of the time, it's not the employees' money. A lot of people think if you did an ESOP, all the employees have to pitch in to buy the company. Usually, that's done through an outside investment bank. There's somebody's paying the owner off, and there's an outside investment bank involved in this transaction.
Yeah, I've been peripherally involved in a few of those as a consultant. A few of them worked just fine. The one that sticks in my head, though, is the one where the owner said, I'm going to test this model. I'm going to China for a month to tour China, and I'm going to announce it before I go. He was back in 1 week. They all started telling each other they're the boss, they're the new owner. They created so much animosity and chaos amongst the team that they were falling apart. I don't think he was back in 1 week, but after the first week, he got a call. And after the second week, he cut his vacation short to come back and say, okay, guys, you know that ESOP we were talking about? It's off the table. You guys
Yeah,
can't work together.
part of that was on him. If you think about
Yeah.
it, like when you ask somebody from the show, somebody called me up and said, "Hey, I'm gonna sell my business. It's not ready yet. How do I know when it's ready?" He goes, "I'm involved in everything right now." I said, "Do the vacation plan." He said, "What's the vacation plan?" Tell everybody that in 4 weeks from now, you're taking 2 weeks off. Think of everything you need done during that 2 weeks. And I want you to take the time off, and think of everything you're going to do, you're going to need done during that 2 weeks and delegate it out. And then come back and see what gets done and what doesn't done and fix it. I said, then 2 months from now, tell everybody you're going to take 3 weeks off. And every 2 months, you're gonna do this every 2 or 3 months. It might take longer because sometimes you're gonna have to fix some stuff. But at some point, you need to be able to take the entire month of December and half a month of January off. When you come back, everything should be not only running as good as it was when you left, but probably better. Like things were improved. They've made sales that you didn't know was even a potential on the sales list. Depending on your sales cycle, because if you really want to know how well it's run, look at your sales cycle. And if you have a 45-day sales cycle, then you need to set up a time where you're gone for longer than that. Do they find new clients? Do they close them? Do they get products and services delivered that you were not involved with, never knew, or never met? That's a key indicator that you're ready to sell this. So the next operator knows he has a functioning company that can operate without you. And it doesn't happen overnight. Like, hey, I'm gone. I'm going to be gone for 2 months. It happens where I'm going to be gone for a week. Here's what I need you to do. I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. Here's what I need you to do. I'm going to be gone for 4.5 weeks. Here's what I need you to do. Then you take I'm going to take a 3 month sabbatical. Johnny over here, you're at the helm. Good luck. And then you talk to Johnny and say, hey, only call me if the chip's on fire and see if they can do it. I didn't come up with that. It's like 5 or 6 guys on the show. They had the same scenario where they walk people through that. It takes something for people to get used to not being around. I've created a few companies where I circled myself with people who absolutely needed me. It was a flaw in my own design. I wanted to feel smart and intelligent. I brought in people that could do their job, but when there was a problem, like you would teach them how to tie their shoelaces, and then if it they come back and go, "This one's in a double knot. How do I untie it?" And every new problem required my solution, and that's not a way to run a company. You don't know you've created something like that sometimes because you're in the helm, you're doing your thing, you're in your tunnel, right? The trees are going 90
Right.
miles an hour, and you see what you see. You're trying to accomplish things until you step back and go, nobody around me solved anything that I didn't design. I didn't put the system in place. What if I go away for a week and see what happens? Now I'm of the other mindset. If I do something 2 or 3 times, I start bringing in my assistants and go, here's what I'm doing right now. I don't want to do that. My job description for a VA is, and I'm going to be a little crude here for you guys, do shit I don't want to do. Like, find stuff I do and see if you can do it better. If you can do it better, take it away from me. So anything I don't want to do is the number one step. Like, do stuff Ron doesn't want to do. And the second one is find stuff you can do better than Ron and tell him. If you see me doing something that's repetitive, like I'm posting on social media on a regular basis, like my VAs, my assistants, they know that say, hey, why are you doing that? Give it to me. I got that. You don't need to do that no more. Go do something new. That takes something. And it takes something for these business owners to do this too. Especially these guys, they've been doing the same thing for your business owners. What do they be, 25, 30 years at the seat?
Yeah, some of them. Some of them have never been away from that seat, like we were talking about. And you chat with them, and they'll tell you that, yeah, I'm way too ingrained in this company and way too important to the operations. And some of them like that because it makes them feel important.
There you go. Their sense of identity is tied around it. So that's the other thing
Mhm.
you have to break as a broker, right? But it's fascinating how deep each of us tie our identity to what we do. If I walk up to a stranger on the streets and say, hey, my name is Ron Skelton, who are you? When they tell me who they are, they almost always will tell me what they do. Try it sometime when you're just like, not in a business setting. If you're at a
Right.
coffee shop and say, hey, I'm Eric, who are you? And they'll say, my name's so and so, I'm a security guard or I'm a cop, or they'll tell you what they do without you having to ask. Sometimes if they don't, if they say, oh, I'm John, I'll say, cool, what do you enjoy? They'll tell you what they do for a job. Like they don't tell you, well, I enjoy going sitting over the ocean, watching the waves wear off the rocks. Circling back around to this, what we're talking about here.
Yeah, we talk to business owners right up front about what their level of involvement is in the business because we need to set a clear expectation for the buyer. And the other thing it does is it does highlight opportunities for a buyer. Because my thought, especially in the smaller businesses, the buyer pool really doesn't want to buy a business. They'd like to establish something of their own. So when you set out a list of opportunities for them to take that business and put their own stamp on it, it really gets them excited. So I'm not really afraid of an owner who is the business and selling that type of business because it does present significant opportunity to a buyer. You just got to present it right. But the
Yeah.
person who has established a business that runs by itself, where the new owner isn't coming in on day one and working in the business, they can spend all their time working on those opportunities. Obviously, that's more attractive to a buyer, especially the buyers who've accumulated more capital can afford a larger business. Because in larger businesses, you find that's the case more often than in smaller businesses.
Yeah, there's a shift along somewhere along that seller's discretion earnings, you bit a shift where you're selling
Mhm.
to operators versus selling to like holdcos and guys who want to put an operator in place. I'm 51. To be honest, I really don't want to operate anything. I'd rather hold, and I catch myself doing it. I actually still write articles for some of my newsletters, partly because I enjoy it, but partly because I acquired them too small or I built one from scratch. That said, is it the right way to run it? Yeah, probably not. I know there's better writers out there than me, but you catch yourself wanting to do certain things, wanting to contribute. How do you deal with the conversation of what they're going to do next? Because the seller's reluctance to close, they'll come to you, they know they need to sell, they want to sell, but their ability for them to close is really hinged on them being comfortable. Like to show up to the closing table, they have to know what they're going to do next. They have to be comfortable with what the day after close looks like.
Yeah, you need to have that conversation with them right up front. I want to retire. I want to spend more time with my grandkids. I want to travel. I want to do this. I want to do that. Whatever that bucket list may be, I take note of it. because you talked about the human psychology of a deal. It's a huge change in someone's life, especially when they've been doing the same thing for 30 years, to step away from it. And in the process of stepping away, they develop all these fears and phobias of what's next. So you got to go back and remind them of all those things that they said that they wanted to do once they left the business, and
I,
say those things were excited you back when you and I first met. Are they not exciting you again today? Aren't you excited at taking that European vacation now, or going to Australia like you said you wanted to do? Aren't you excited about that now? And that kind of gets them back into, yeah, I can do this. There's so much psychology involved in a deal. I
I
feel
have
like
that.
I have an honorary degree by now.
I have the same conversation early on. One of the guys, he's like, "I'm not quite ready to come back," and he was still getting his business to run on its own. And I have a tendency to do the follow ups until I get what I call a Giphy. Somebody says they're interested in selling, I'll call them back until they tell me to go f myself, right? Like until they tell me to quit calling. So you're in my database, and I'll just run through and make my calls. Sometimes it's every 6 months or something if I'm really interested in it. So I call this guy back, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm not selling." I said, "Well, I thought you wanted to go spend time with your grandkids." "Well, I told you I'm making this thing run on its own." He goes, "I took a month off and took the grandkids to Disney World and everything else." So my rule of thumb now is if they only list one or two things, let's get creative and go, what else you want to do? What else you want to do? Because if
Yeah,
they have the realization that it's hard to be around your grandkids for 40, 50 hours a week, he's like, "I was so ready to get back here and do something at the office." The grandkids came over for the summer. They're there with my wife right now, and I'm at the office every day. If they only have one or two things, go, "Oh, cool. What else would you like to do?" I did it myself. When I got out of real estate, we had enough properties. Our houses were free and clear. Our cars were free and clear. We really didn't have that much debt. So we live in a tiny home that's cheap. I can park it on a piece of land almost anywhere for just under $1,000 a month. Here, even here in California, under $1,000 a month usually. Let's make sure people know how to get a hold of you. Start off
sure.
with what's your target market, meaning I know you can do manufacturing anywhere. You just told me
Mhm.
about Pennsylvania stuff. So kind of give me your I'd love to work with X, Y, and Z companies in these locations. And then we'll follow up with how do they reach out and get a hold of you and how do they find you?
Yeah, I mean, geographically has some bearing. So anything in Florida, we'll look at any listing or any business in Florida that wants to sell. So they're part of our target market. We've done deals in the Panhandle, the East Coast, Northeast, and a ton in the South and Southwest Florida from Tampa South on the West Coast. So that's geographically any industry in Florida. Outside of Florida, we're really looking at businesses that are in that $1 million to $25 million enterprise value to make it worth our time to travel up to them. So my team, because I'm not the only, I have 5 other intermediaries, but our team, my focal points are mostly medical, dental, manufacturing outside of the state of Florida. I've also done large restaurants outside of the state of Florida. So if it makes sense, we'll do it outside of the state of Florida. My team's expertise, I've got a former veterinarian, I've got a former retail shop owner, I've got a former e-commerce business owner, I've got a former marine related business owner who had a tour boat business. So we've got a lot of skills on our team, a lot of different industry knowledge that we can apply and that we share with one another. Outside of the state of Florida, usually stuff that fits within those types of businesses. Great service related businesses anywhere. So lawn, landscaping, AC contractors, electrical contractors. We've dealt with enough of them here in Southwest Florida where we know the space nationally. So that's kind of what we're looking for from a sell side. From a buy side, predominantly we like to help folks who are looking in Florida because it's easy for us to source businesses in Florida. Outside of the state of Florida, where there's no cooperative broker network. So a lot of the other brokers, if I brought them a buyer, let's say in North Dakota or California, and I said, hey, here's a buyer, they're interested in this business you have for sale. The answer I get back is, okay, give me the buyer, I'll give you a small referral fee. They cut you out of the deal right away. So it's hard to help buyers outside of the state of Florida. But if someone's looking to purchase in Florida, we've got tons of tools to help them find the right business, which is great. The other services we provide are valuations. So those range anywhere from an opinion of value that we do starting at $1,500 to a certified business appraisal. I've got three on staff,
Hmm.
three certified appraisers on staff. And then we can do some exit planning. Usually we're too busy to do in-depth exit planning. So a lot of times we will outsource that to a colleague of ours. Or if it's something that's real simple, we can help business owners do their own exit plan, execute their own business plan. So that's the fourth leg on the stool of services we offer. General consulting, we kind of stay away from. Someone wants us to come in there and help them grow their business or something in that effect. But we do have partners in that space that we can refer them to as well. Our focal point is really buying, selling, valuing, and planning your exit.
And I can see where the growth comes into play because somebody comes and say, "Hey, I really need $3 million out of my business. I'm willing to work a little bit to get there." You're like, a lot of times, the real answer, and I've had to have this conversation with sellers a couple of times, probably more times than I'm willing to admit. Like, cool, you got about 2 or 3 years worth of work to do. Here's what you need to do. You got to grow your EBITDA or your seller's discretionary earnings. Of this, there's some cool ways to do it. Here's 2 or 3 different guys that can advise you on how to get there. So, do
Right.
you outsource that type of conversation?
We'll refer business coaches over.
Cool. So, how do people reach out to you? What's your preferred way for people to contact you?
The best way is phone or email. Phone number 239-738-6227 is my direct line. Email is Eric, ERIC, at Edison, EDISON, B is in business, A is in advisors.com. And of course, our website is www.edisonba.com.
Cool.
Yes.
And I'll make sure that stuff's in the show notes. I typically don't put your email in the show notes because of the spam engine, but I'll put your phone number and the website. So thank you for being on the show today. Let's just call that a show and hang out for a few minutes.
All right. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's your host, Ronald Skelton. I want to thank you personally for watching the show today and invite you to call our new hotline, 918-641-4150. That's 918-641-4150. Call us and tell us about our show, ask questions, suggest guests, or even tell me about a business you have for sale, and we'll reach back out to you. Again, that number is 918-641-4150. Call our hotline, leave us some information. Thank you. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between $5 million and $30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT-enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.